Hello and welcome to another video, and today I'm going to show you what happened when I tested my deadlift yesterday, and then I'm going to give you my top 3 tips to improve your deadlift. So if you are excited and you just can't hide it and you're about to lose control and you think you like it,
I'm so excited and I just can't hide it.
then drop this video a like, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and let's go. Okay, we're in. So like I just said, I tested my deadlift yesterday. Now it wasn't planned. Basically my current training program has conservative singles programmed in, and the beauty of that is that when I'm feeling good like I was yesterday, I can push it on a little bit more and try and hit something a little bit heavier. So I'm sure a lot of you came here to see what I could deadlift. Without further ado, this is what happened. And there you have it, 260 boy, which given the context, I'm pretty satisfied with. The OGs amongst you might be sitting there thinking, Matt, you've pulled way more than that in the past. And that's true, but don't tell everyone. I'm trying to hype this 260 up, jeez. Yeah, that's the most I've deadlifted like this year, so in the last 8 months since changing from powerlifting to bodybuilding. When I was powerlifting, so last year I deadlifted 310 kilograms. But there were 3 significant changes that have occurred since then. So back when I did that, I was deadlifting 3 times a week versus only once a week now. Secondly, I was significantly heavier in terms of body weight. And thirdly, that 310 was pulled on a deadlift bar, whereas now I'm using a gym bar. So those things do make a difference. I'm obviously not as strong as I was then. But yeah, I mean, I felt really good. Like that's the best I felt yesterday deadlifting since changing to bodybuilding, so I'm really happy with that. I have recently split my squats and deadlifts up, which definitely helped because deadlifting after squatting is tough. But now that I'm not going to be competing as a powerlifter, I figured there was no real reason to group it in that way. So I'm now deadlifting separately. So I'm pretty hopeful that yeah, towards the end of this year and beyond, I can get back up to like the 300 kilo mark, kind of 7 plates aside. That'll be like a nice short-term goal, and I reckon it's pretty realistic. Anyway, enough about me. I want this video to be useful and applicable to your training so you can take something away from it. So what I'm going to do now is give you some deadlift tips. Now I could talk about deadlift form and technique and advice for hours, but I've picked out my 3 top tips, ones that I think are going to be particularly applicable, particularly useful for your training, ones that I see people neglecting all the time, and they're going to be key for both the efficiency of your deadlift, but also safety. Now safety, when it comes to deadlift, is something that people really underestimate. Like, you've got to think, if you're going to be deadlifting for 5, say 10 years, then your adherence is going to be key. You know, the number of deadlift sessions you accumulate over that period of time is going to dictate ultimately how strong your deadlift gets. If you spend half of that time injured and you can't deadlift, obviously, you know, you're not going to get strong as you could if you're deadlifting consistently over that period of time. So by taking one step back, getting everything solid, getting everything like tight and consistent, maybe dropping the weight for a bit, that's going to enable you in the long term to deadlift a lot more. You know, people look at things with a short-term approach. It's really important you adopt more of a long-term approach, particularly when it comes to deadlift, because like I said, injuries are pretty much the biggest reason that people's deadlift sucks. So I'm going to give you my top 3 tips. Now these are going to be applicable to both sumo deadlift and conventional deadlift. They're going going to be applicable to beginners, intermediate, even in some cases advanced lifters. So here we go. Tip number one is going to be to prevent your hips from shooting up. This is one of the most common errors I see with deadlifting, particularly people deadlifting for the first time, and that is that they adopt what looks to be a really good setup, but the second they initiate the pull, the second they start deadlifting, their hips shoot up, leaving their torso almost perpendicular to the ground. Now, the problem with this is two problems. Firstly, it's really inefficient, like it's not going to be a good way to deadlift a lot of weight, and secondly, it's really dangerous. It's going to put an enormous amount of pressure on your back, and you are almost inevitably going to get injured. Now, if someone said to me, go and destroy your back, short of like jumping off a building, that'll be my next port of call. Like I said, it puts so much pressure, so much torque on your lower back, you are asking for an injury. Now, there are two main reasons that this issue might occur. Firstly, that you're setting up too low. So some people get so obsessed with using their leg drive that they start in like a really deep squat. Now, it is impossible to deadlift any kind of weight from that position. All that's going to happen is that when the pressure gets high, when you start to pull, when the weight gets heavy, your hips are just going to rise up. So you need to find that sweet spot. Another reason it might happen is that you're just weak. Like if your hamstrings, if your legs are weak, then your body's automatically going to try and shift the emphasis to your lower back where you're stronger, and therefore your hips are going to rise. So in terms of fixing the problem, I mean, the first thing I would say is, like I said, get stronger hamstrings, like train your hamstrings, basically by deadlifting properly, you are essentially going to fix the problem. You are going to make your hamstring stronger. The best way to deadlift better is to practice deadlifting better, in short. Another good fix will be just to find that sweet spot. Find the point where your hips want to be. Like if you set up too low, like I said, your hips are only going to rise up to that point, the point they want to be at anyway, which is going to result in a really inefficient double movement. So just find that sweet spot. Find the point where your hamstrings start to get tight, where you start to feel tension. Find the point where you can get your hips relatively high, but still maintain that straight neutral lumbar spine that I'll get onto in a minute. And when you find that point, when you get to a point where you can start pulling the bar and everything rises up in sync, that's when you've got that. That's where you want to be, basically. Now, if you look at yourself from side on, if you imagine there are dots on your knees and your hips and your shoulders, you want those dots to be rising in sync. They want to be rising simultaneously. When they're doing that, it means that everything is working in unison. Your hamstrings, your lower back are working in unison, your glutes, and it's going to make you much, much stronger. It's going to make your pull much more efficient, which in turn is going to be a lot safer. So just work on doing that. Get a friend to watch you, try and film it if you can. If you see your hips are rising up before your shoulders, then stop them doing it. There's no easy way around it. It comes down to to your brain and to developing those neural pathways and that kind of motor pattern of just deadlifting properly. Do not allow your hips to rise up. Do not allow your legs to straighten. It's very common for people to lock out their knees, straighten their legs when their torso is nowhere near lockout. All that's going to happen there is that although it may be stronger off the floor, when you get to lockout, you're not going to be able to finish the movement. You're going to get stuck. So just desperately try to let your hips and knees not extend, not come up until your chest and shoulders are also on the way up. Try and get yourself fixed in that setup, in that starting position, and then think of yourself as like a robot, as a machine. Everything is going to rise up in sync, and when you start doing that, your deadlift strength, your deadlift performance is going to go through the roof. Tip number 2 is going to be to maintain a neutral lumbar spine. Now this basically means keeping your lower back straight, and now this is a very, very common mistake you see with people deadlifting, again, particularly with beginners, is that they start deadlifting, the weight gets heavy, and they have that horrible rounded back, that kind of scared cat position. The problem with this is that again, it's going to be very inefficient, because although you may be stronger off the floor, as you get near lockout, you're going to struggle to finish the lift because your back's in a horrible, inefficient position. And secondly, it's ridiculously dangerous. Again, just like the last one, if someone said to me, go and obliterate your spine, you'd struggle to find something better than deadlifting with a rounded back. It will put your lumbar spine under so much pressure. It's definitely something you want to avoid, something you want to eradicate from your deadlifting. Now, the reason it might happen, there are kind of, I guess, 3 reasons it might happen. Firstly, is that your body's trying to cheat. Okay, so when your back rounds, what happens is effectively you're lengthening the lever, you're making your arms longer, which makes your deadlift stronger. The longer your arms are, the less distance the bar has to travel, the more efficient a position your hips can get in, and therefore it makes you stronger. So automatically your body's going to want to round it to make you stronger. You have to resist that. The second reason it might happen is that you're simply not flexible enough. Some people can't get into a proper setup position without rounding their lower back because their lower back and their hamstrings are so tight. So in that case, obviously just get more flexible. And thirdly, it could just be a weakness. If your lumbar spine spine is weak, if you're not able to maintain that straight position, it could just be a weakness. It could be the fact that it can't hold that position under load. So in terms of fixing this, the first thing I would do is just like the last one, it's a mind over matter. It is a case of you stopping your back from doing it. Get someone to watch, get someone to film. The second you feel or you see your lumbar spine starting to round, you've got to stop it. If that means dropping the weight right down, then so be it. Do not allow yourself to deadlift with that rounded lumbar spine position, because A, you're going to get injured, and B, all you're doing is teaching yourself the wrong motor patterns. Secondly, if required, you can get more flexible, okay? So you can do, lower back and hamstring stretches. To be honest, my preference would just be to deadlift properly. If you drop the weight down, maybe do some deficit deadlifts, just get used to deadlifting in that correct position. Force your lumbar spine to stay neutral, maybe even extend it slightly. And the more you do that, the more flexible you're going to get, and the more suited your physique and your body is going to be to that movement. And thirdly, again, just get stronger. That is the answer to most things. If you can't deadlift in a proper position because you're too weak, then practice deadlifting in that position. Just like the last thing I said, drop the weight, do more reps, make sure the reps, every single rep is good. That's really important as well. If you're doing a set of 6 or 8, don't just bang out 6 or 8 reps. Look at those 6 reps as 6 singles. Do each one as a single, get your setup right, get that lumbar spine straight, and force it to stay straight. And by doing that, you are contracting those erectors, you are making your back stronger in the process of doing that. Then what's going to happen is that a few months down the line, you'll be able to start ramping up the weight, but crucially, your form is going to be good, your form is going to be safe, and that's going to enable you to lift a lot more weight further down the line. Now, one quick point to note with this one is that lumbar spine rounding should not be confused with upper spine rounding. So some people, myself included, will deliberately flex your upper back, your thoracic spine, because it makes your deadlift stronger. Now, your thoracic spine is designed to be flexed under pressure. It's fine, you can do that. Your lumbar spine is not, okay? So do not flex, do not round, do not bend your lumbar spine when you deadlift. When you get to a more intermediate to advanced level, you can try practicing rounding your thoracic spine, because again, that's basically going to elongate your arms, which is going to make your deadlift more solid. As long as you stay in that position for the whole pull and your lumbar spine does not round, that's perfectly safe. And like I said, that should not be confused with lumbar spine rounding, which definitely is not safe. And my third and final tip is going to be to brace properly. Now, bracing basically entails taking in a huge in-breath and just holding it for the duration of your rep. Now, wearing a belt, wearing a lifting belt is going to make this process much, much easier, because it gives you something to push against. So I definitely recommend getting one if you haven't already got one. But yeah, basically what you're going to do when you set up at the bottom of the rep, when you're ready to go, you're going to take in a huge breath, and literally the more air you can get in, the better. Really, really exaggerate the in-breath. When you've done that, you're going to clamp your mouth closed, pushing your tongue against the roof of your mouth. The roof of your mouth is going to help this process, and you're going to keep that air in all the way up and all the way down. You can then breathe out and you can go again. Now, after you've got that massive breath in, you're also going to push your stomach out against your belt, and what that does is it creates a really, really solid base. It makes your spine like concrete, and it makes it much easier to execute points number 1 and points number 2. So keeping your lumbar spine straight and keeping everything rising in sync is going to be miles easier when you start to properly brace. Like when I properly got my head around this and I started implementing it into my own deadlifting and squatting, my lifts went through the roof. It makes things much, much easier. So what you are essentially doing, like I said, is just inflating your torso with air. You're making it much more rigid. If you think about like a football, for example, if a football is flat, if it's not inflated, you can hit it and it just crumples, it has no resistance. If you pump it up, you really inflate it up, when you hit it, it's solid, it doesn't go anywhere. And the same thing applies to your torso, to your spine. If you're trying to keep your torso, your lumbar spine straight, and that you haven't got a good brace, then what's going to happen is that as soon as any weight, any pressure goes through it, it's going to just flop, okay? It's going to go to like the shortest, the easiest position to be in. If you brace really, really hard and you hold it tight for the whole deadlift, although it's going to feel like your brain's going to explode, it's going to make your torso so much more rigid, so much more resilient, which is A, going to reduce the incidence of injury, and B, going to make your deadlift much, much stronger. And that is pretty much that. I wanted to keep the video quite short today. I say that, I always say that, and it ends up being like 3 hours long. I'm like, oh yeah, that was a nice quick one. I go to edit the footage and I have like 4.5 hours of footage, but I'm pretty sure that was quite a concise short video. Like, I wanted to go for a quality over quantity approach. I think sometimes I give out decent information, but it gets lost in like a whole, sea of other crap. So hopefully this was quite kind of concise and quite easy if you just take away those big tips. What you'll notice for all of them is that the safety and the efficiency element are basically, you know, intertwined. Essentially, pulling deadlift properly, so deadlifting in an efficient, strong manner is also, you know, the safest way to go. If you deadlift properly with good form, the risk of you getting injured is going to be, you know, vastly reduced. And like I said at the start, the less injuries you can accumulate over a long period of time, the more deadlift volume you can accumulate, and therefore the stronger you can get. So always remember that. Don't be stupid, don't be arrogant, don't go for like a short-term fix, don't just try and lift, you know, more weight on that day. Play it safe, get your form right, and make sure everything is perfect before you start loading up the weight. And that is that. So I sincerely hope you enjoyed it, guys. If you have enjoyed it, please give it a thumbs up. Feel free to share it with a friend whose deadlift form absolutely sucks, although maybe do it on the down low, in the same way that, you know, if you buy your girlfriend like a low-calorie recipe book, that's not going to end well. And I will see you tomorrow.
You know what?